got my courage up and said I'm going to do it anyway. I have a particular affinity for the letters that Paul wrote to churches, because in those letters I found teaching that actually led me to become a Unitarian Universalist, which may seem odd to some, but today I want to talk a bit about that. But before I go there, I'd like to talk about not what it's this conflict people have with, I'll tell you, if you write something you think is good, or a letter, and 300 years goes by, and somebody says, this letter is the Word of God, it's ruined. Just forget it. Because what it says will lose its meaning, and somebody else will put meaning on it. And I think that's what happened to the Apostle Paul. Because when he wrote his letters, there was no Word of God. There were letters to particular churches struggling with particular problems. And that's all they were from his experience, from his spiritual experience. I mean, here was a man raised, well-to-do, Roman citizen, Jewish, went to the best school, seminaries, studied with the brightest people in his time, but he was captured by an ideology. And he was captured so much by an ideology that he felt himself to be so right in what he believed, he gave himself permission to walk around and persecute people who believed this new belief, some to death, some to prison. I don't know if you remember the story of Stephen, who was proclaiming the gospel of Jesus, and Paul actually had him stoned to death. And then that's when people laid their cloaks at Paul's feet, giving him credit for this murder, essentially. So one day he's walking down the road, and this bright light hits him, falls to the ground, and that's when Jesus said to him, "Why are you persecuting me?" At that point, Paul disappears for 14 years. He's gone. Now, I can remember even when I was 18, 19 years old, I would hear people in the church I was in saying to other people, "Why can't you be more like Paul?" Not just to me, to other people, to make them feel guilty, to try to make them behave better, whatever they would do with that. And I'm thinking, well, because we haven't had the 14 years. Give us the 14 years to go do some self-examination after a tremendous spiritual experience, and maybe we could be more like it. So even at that early age, I realized people would take words and letters and thoughts of other people and beat people up with it and coerce them, make them feel guilty, make them feel shameful. But what I learned from him is something very similar when I read the words of Henry Corbin. And I couldn't believe the similarities between the two. And Henry Corbin's writing about mystics and Sufi mystics and those kinds of ideas and experiences. And he says that when you meditate, and when you turn inward, and when you're able to let go of the world, that you may meet that inner angel, which we've talked about before. You may meet that divine light within yourself. You may meet what I'm calling today wisdom's voice. And when you meet that, and when you have that encounter, and which is marked by love and compassion, when you have that encounter, and you return from that encounter, if you try to take your experience that you had with your inner angel, with the divine light, with wisdom's voice, and impose it upon other people, if you do that, it is called spiritual imperialism. And he goes on to further say that good religion will do this. Will facilitate people experiencing that inner divine moment. That's what healthy religion minister or a fellow church member, them imposing their experience upon you and saying this is the right experience for you to have, you now know that's called spiritual imperialism. Spiritual imperialism is born from fear. What is this? It is born from fear. It is born from a way of life in which you feel you must conform to others. Christopher Bolus puts it this way. To achieve such totality of mind where a group of people are agreeing with the tenets of a particular spiritual imperialism thought process, to achieve such a totality, the mind itself must be in a condition of having no doubt, no uncertainty, no self-interrogation. This kind of doubt and uncertainty and self-interrogation with this particular group that's bound by the spiritual imperialism is considered a weakness. And I thought, that's what we do here at the Unitarian Universalist Church. We do self-interrogate. We do look at history. We do challenge our own ideologies, and we try to have a fluid sense of imagination so that we can shift our beliefs when we learn new information. And we're intentional about that. But here's this other group saying, oh no, that's a weakness. He goes on to say, this is accompanied, in my view, Christopher Wallace's view, by a special act of binding as doubts and counterviews are expelled and the mind ceases to be complex, achieving a simplicity held together initially by bindings around signs of the ideology. And this moves us toward, further in his thought, to a frozen imagination, a frozen ideology so that nothing else can get in and there's nothing new, which is where it conflicts with Paul's teaching, where there's nothing new. We know in psychological and spiritual health that, or maybe that's what, you have a child, an infant, and you watch that child, you watch that infant have certain tendencies to go toward this object or to go toward that object or to laugh at this or to do that. You'll see the inclination of the child. And so what you do is you might then say if the child's fascinated with stars, you might go buy a book full of stars. You might go buy a telescope visit. You will nurture that. And what that's called is you're giving the child a symbol of something that hits a chord in them, and when they have that symbol in their world, they begin to grow, they begin to mature. It's called symbol elaboration. That there's this symbol out here, there's this book, and you like the cover of this book, and it's a symbol of something, so you read this book, and that develops something within yourself. When you have that frozen ideology, that cannot happen. For example, I don't know if many of you know Bill Maher. Some of you might. It's kind of crass, but to the point. So I'm watching Bill Maher, and you know probably if you watch him, he is an devout atheist and very critical of any religion. Okay. So he's got a guest on, to my surprise, who is the pastor of the First Dallas Church, First Baptist Church of Dallas, Southern Baptist. He's a leader in that Southern Baptist movement, which is my home territory, Southern Baptist belief. Right? It's why I wasn't in that group the way I interpreted the Apostle Paul's writings. But anyway, Bill Maher's going to try to track him. So Bill Maher, and he knows that this guy's supporting a particular political candidate who is supportive of war and aggression and capital punishment. So Bill Maher's going to go after him politely at first. And he says, he starts quoting phrases from Bill Maher starts quoting phrases from the Bible. Jesus teaches, love your enemies. Jesus teaches, pray for your enemies. Jesus teaches, be kind. Jesus teaches all these things. And he says, how do you deal with that? Supporting this particular political social economic view that supports war. How do you do that? Which I think, okay, that's a real question. Here's a person who has a set of beliefs that give them permission to do this socially, but claims this religious belief over here that says to do just the opposite. So I'm ready for an engaging conversation. Okay. Immediately, he says, oh no. The Apostle Paul writes in the book of Romans chapter 13 that we are to be subject to authority. So whatever the authority, governing authority, so whatever the governing authorities tell us to do, that's what we should do. So Bill Maher says, whoa, whoa, whoa. He's trapped. He says, whoa, wait a minute. I'm talking about the words of Jesus. And then the minister says, whoa, no, wait a minute. I'm talking about the Word of God. See, that Jesus and Paul are equal even when they say opposite things. So at that point, Bill Maher just kind of shook his head because there's a problem there. Because what that means is I can say I have an ethic, but when I'm trapped with that ethic, I can shift over here and come out with something totally different and be completely justified. So what they did was, and the other thing that's aggravating to me about that is I know that when Paul wrote that, he wrote that in a particular socioeconomic political situation where Rome is the imperialist power over the Jewish people in Jerusalem and Judea, and that they were persecuting people that were believing in Jesus and killing them, just as Paul knew because he was one that was doing it. So when he writes, be subject to authority, from my interpretation, what he's saying is, don't challenge the authorities because if you do, you're going to get killed. Keep yourself safe. It does not give the imperialistic power of today permission to be imperialistic, as was interpreted. So it's crazy. Okay. That's a frozen ideology. It can have no real depth. We can't have a conversation because sometimes we do opposite things because we believe. I'm creating an organization, Preachers Against Pollution. Right? I'm the only member. What did Groucho Marx say? I wouldn't be a member of a club that would have me as a member. But I'm the only member of that. So I was thinking about that, taking myself seriously sometimes. And I'm thinking, well, when I start the car, I pollute. Historically, I might have taken a poison and put on ants. Now, after reading this book, I've finally come alongside with Helen and have gone to safeguard non-poison stuff to help deal with those issues, because after reading that book on the universe and ideas about, I just can't put